Motherhood. 1 minute, you're mom of the year.
I love you, Mommy.
Then the next, not so much. From bath time to bullying, from potty training to puberty, parenting is full of challenges. But one thing is for certain, you are not alone. Welcome to Modern Mom Probs. I'm your host, author, mother, parenting expert, Tara Clark. Join me while we tackle today's modern mom problems. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Modern Mom Probs, where we try to solve the world's modern mom problems. And if we can't do that, well, at least we're having fun talking about it. Today, I'm excited to have some repeat guests. I have the Mitchells. Erin and Stephen Mitchell are back to talk about their new book. And the topic is Too Tired to Fight: Conflicts Couples Must Have. So oftentimes we think, oh, I don't want to have a conflict. I just like the book's called Too Tired to Fight. But the important thing is not only to have a conflict, but to repair and talk about it. So Erin and Stephen Mitchell are the co-founders of Couples Counseling for Parents, a company focused on providing access to research-informed, psychologically sound online education for couples. Both have a clinical education. Stephen is a PhD in medical family therapy, and Erin has a master's degree in counsel psychology. They have a combined 23 years of experience providing counseling and education, and they've been married for 16 years, and they have 3 wonderful boys. Erin and Stephen, welcome back to the show. I am so excited to have you both back on the show. I would say welcome to the show. You're repeat guests, and I only bring back my absolute favorite people. And the two of you are some of my absolute favorite people. So what's new with you? What have you been up to?
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for having us. We love being here.
So excited.
So glad to be a favorite. Makes my day, I guess. But we have been up to a lot. I think the biggest thing is we
launched a book.
I don't know what other big things.
Well, we've made it. We're in July now, so we have 3 kids. We've made a month and a half, I guess, of summer, which it feels like a major accomplishment.
That is a major accomplishment.
Yeah.
We were like 13 minutes into summer, and one of our kids was like, "What do we do?" And I was like, "Oh no." Like, you can be bored for a minute. So we've been practicing being bored.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's so important to practice being bored. Just the other day, my son was hanging out with a friend, and my son did not have any device on him. His friend did. And then my son sat in a chair and he just started spinning like in the chair. And then his friend saw that and he was like, oh, I want to do that too. So then they were both spinning, and I turned to my friend and I was like, just let them be bored. Let them be bored.
Yeah.
And you know what? They always find something to do. So they were just spinning in their chairs.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I love that. We have 2 spinny chairs, and they're old, and that is what they're for. 100%.
That's it. Just like the kids will always figure out what to do.
The best games in our house come from like that sort of creative boredom.
Yeah.
They're the most fun. And then they're played for nothing else is played for like a week or 2. It's like, this is all we do. And then time for the next round of creative play. It's great. But yes, we're doing it. We're doing summer. That feels like a major accomplishment also.
It does. It really does. Not quite as big as the book, because that I feel like that's like several years in the making.
That's so true. Yeah.
And here we are now. So tell me a little bit about it.
It's called Too Tired to Fight. You can go. I can see you.
No, I'm just looking. I'm just watching you describe the book. You're doing great.
Honestly, Tara, it's this book that Stephen and I wish we had had. It is the conversations we have with all the couples we talk to over and over and over and over and again. And we really think it is just a very important tool, but also a very practical tool to help couples find connection. Yes, in the midst of conflict, but also just communication skills while this beautiful, chaotic thing called parenting is happening.
Yeah. And so kind of the premise of it is we go through the 13 essential conflicts that parents must have to keep their relationship strong. And so that's the whole idea, like that we want to help couples have strong relationships as they parent. And we also realize that parenting is stressful. and that it can oftentimes confuse communication. And if two partners are feeling like they're having conflict, not able to communicate, their relationship feels more disconnected, and then the family can begin to feel more disconnected. And we understand that, and we understand that struggle firsthand.
Hypothetically, just
right. But we also that's what we talk to couples about all the time, and we really do want to create an avenue and a way for couples to be close and to have strong relationships. So.
What I love in the beginning of the book, you differentiate between the word fight and conflict. Do you want to explore that a little bit? Because I think many people may be leaning into this going well, I don't want to fight with my spouse. That's
right.
that's not what I'm here to do. I fight with people all day at work or whatever, It's just
right.
I don't want to come home and fight. So what's the difference between a fight and a conflict?
I mean, that's exactly right. We are all too tired to fight. And even if we weren't, who wants to fight anyway? But also, I am too tired to fight. And I think that's the thing. And that's the actual differentiation. I'm so glad you brought it up. People come to us with either we try to bring up something important and it does turn into a fight, which is this dead end. I don't really know anymore what we're talking about, or I've kind of lost myself in this. I can't tell you how many times we've been in the middle of a conflict fight. And I'm I don't even know what we're talking about. Why and where did this start? And why are we doing this? And I wish I was sleeping 37 minutes ago. I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's not only not productive, it's counterproductive. And you feel more disconnected from yourself. You feel more lonely. You feel more lost. You feel more what's the point? So tomorrow the goal is just to what I think we say it in the book, let's just make it till bedtime. You go your way, I'll do my things. See ya maybe tomorrow night. And this conflict that we're trying to help couples have, and honestly, it's an individual thing as well, is it's a self thing. It's knowing what you mean to be saying. And that's really hard to know yourself in the midst of, and we do say stress. Parenting is stressful, but part of stress is just goodness too. Beautiful, wonderful moments are also heightened energy also. And it's really hard to hear what it is you're trying to tell yourself, even in the midst of all of that. So certainly telling your partner, hey, there was something I wanted to talk to you about. It's lost. It's just, and all of a sudden all you're saying is, I hate when you do that. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
Why do you do that? And that's, shocker, but not great communication. It's going to be hard to be heard in that.
Yeah. Well, and I think we all know, I don't know if we all know this or not, fighting, even that idea of having conflict, all this kind of stuff feels very negative. It feels very you shouldn't do that. If you have a good relationship, or if you're close, or if you're a good communicator, you will not do that kind of stuff. And I think that, I grew up in an environment where fighting happened and it was really negative. It was all that disconnective stuff. There wasn't really, what we're talking about is there's a way to engage differences. There's a way to have conflict that actually is productive and connective. And I think that that's, in some ways, I know that was a new concept for me when I first got into a relationship with Erin. And so I think that that's what we're talking about. There's a way to explore your differences in conflict rather than getting lost in that kind of negative cycle of what a fight might feel like.
Where you're further known, where it actually matters, where bringing something up matters to your partner. And even if they don't agree, we are certainly not saying this is the book where now you and your partner will agree all the time. It's you will be known, you can be understood, you can feel loved. I don't agree with that, but I love you. And it's important to me because it's important to you.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned a lot about turning conflict into connection. Where do you even start with that?
I love that. So I think the beginning of conflict to connection is yourself, but sort of back to that initial premise of what is important? Why am I frustrated? And like I said, that's not an easy process to start. So there is a little bit of clunkiness in the beginning of trying to get this conflict to turn into connection because we aren't practiced in this. I'll just take myself personally. I am very attuned to my three humans, our three humans, and honestly to Steven a lot of the time. I'm very aware of what's happening in our house. I know this kid's working on this. I know this kid's talking about this thing with this friend. I know what's happening. I am last on my list very often of people to be paying attention to and checking in with. And why am I irritated? I feel overwhelmed. I don't really know why. I don't know how that started. I don't even know when that started. Sometime maybe in 2010, maybe. I don't but like getting practiced at that. And we have that's sort of the point of the book is we lay it out step by step to start making that an everyday practice. So it doesn't take me 40 minutes every time now. I can be like, oh yeah, I remember what's happening for me now and why that glass on the windowsill, that, pan left on the stove, why that feels like an 11 to me rather than an irritation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that self part is really key. And we kind of talk through like knowing, like being aware of even your, like how stress impacts you as an individual and knowing those kind of physical triggers, but then also those experiential triggers. And then what you're trying to do is you're really trying to describe something important about yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you think about conflict in that way, if I think about, even if Erin's upset with me or if there's some energy that doesn't feel good or whatever it is, she's trying to tell me there's something important to her. I actually want to hear that. Like I care about Erin. I care about what she cares about. And so I think that the beginning place is finding that way to describe yourself and your experience to your partner. And then you're engaged in, okay, how do we navigate this? How do I understand? How do you understand where I'm coming from? That, those kind of basic things that we think we should all be good at, but are skills we all have to learn.
And then I think relearn again in parenting.
Yeah.
It's different. Our communication was so different when we didn't have kids. And it wasn't perfect then either, but it is certainly more confused and noisy now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
More challenged.
Yes.
I think a lot of times people, and I'm going to say women here specifically,
sure,
don't know how to broach it with their partner when they're feeling a certain way, right? Like when they're starting to feel a certain level of resentment, maybe it's for the mental load, laundry, so many different
Yes.
things.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the two of you are so good about helping people sort of like crack that open and say like, this is how you should broach it. Like, this is how you should put yourself out there. But I think many times people are still struggling with this because they don't know where to start. They don't know where to begin to have the conversation.
So yes, I think that's exactly right. Because I think that typically when we think to begin communication is when we are at the sort of that breaking point, when we are overwhelmed and when it feels like we're trying to communicate that, because that's not a bad place. There's a better one, but it's not like don't do that if you're overwhelmed, certainly. But that's really hard not only to hear, right? Like I am overwhelmed, but also it's hard to know what you mean. And all basically at that point, all you're wanting is, I am so stressed out. I am so burned out. And what I hear you saying is you don't care because it doesn't change. And it's not, you're not jumping into action now suddenly. Or yeah, you did for 3 days because you remembered and then you got stressed again and then you forgot and now it's back. And so I'm like, oh, you really sincerely and truly don't care about my stress, what I'm trying to say. And that begins to be a pretty fractured place in a couple. So it then you've now stacked on it doesn't go well. It's pointless, and then vice versa. Like you just said this to me last week. And so there's either this like, yeah, why did I stop? Or, like, why am I not keeping up with it? Why not? And then there's that withdrawal or there's that defensiveness or like, I did it. And you know what else? I also did this other whatever thing. And like, now we're talking about the tit for tat, which is, honestly, I think the worst.
Well, I think there's also a reality too, like you're saying, Tara, like, so it's I'm upset about the laundry and that can feel like a silly thing. And I think that there are no silly things.
Mm-hmm.
Our relationships are like made up of all these micro interactions, these micro moments that mean everything. And so laundry isn't just laundry. There's a story behind laundry. There's a story behind why it feels the way it feels. And there's all these little micro moments that I think partners have where they choose to kind of think like, oh, I won't say that. That's silly. Or I'll just let it go. I don't want to start anything.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know what? Like, I shouldn't be upset about that. Whatever it might be. And I think that what happens is those things stack up and it's the 20th time laundries come. And then it's like, now I have something to say. And I think that, we really encourage couples that there are no silly things. And it's always about the story behind the laundry, in a sense. Like, what about this? What does this mean to you? And I think that for some, that does take some effort to kind of tease apart, and it's a skill and learning, okay, like, wait a second, like maybe there's more here. How do I, locate that and then communicate that? But it's also a skill to listen. And I think that that's what we try to teach both partners. Like, whoever's expressing, there's a skill there, but also in listening, there's a skill there of like, recognizing that your partner is trying to tell you something important. There's a way to listen, to not become defensive, to believe what they're having to say, and then trying to like repair whatever that break is. And so there are no silly things. There are no little things. Everything matters.
But I also think, Tara, to your point, I think specifically for women, we are, Stephen, in our book, and all the time, is regularly talking about like correcting experiences or repeating experiences. So we're very much wanting, and not, sometimes we know that, sometimes we don't, but I think
our past experiences, we either want to repeat those or correct them.
Yes. And I know, like, for me, it is very important to me. We have 3 boys, that our boys see Stephen and me chipping in equitably. That didn't happen in the house I grew up in, neither from my parents, also for me and my brother. And I didn't, because it was the house I grew up in, or maybe it was just me, I'm not really sure, but I didn't notice that I didn't like that until I got older. And then we started some of these things and like, no, we're not doing it that way. Like, no. I'm not in charge of this. You are not in charge of that. Like, we will talk these things through. There's not this like, sort of pre-stereotype structured things.
It's like on the holidays where all of the guys sit down at the table and then the women clean the table and put all the dishes back into the kitchen.
100% that. Yes. And all the little moments in a day.
And
it's
unspoken.
Happens.
It's just unspoken. It just,
That's right.
all the females rise and we clean the table and all the guys sit there and talk.
And that may have been fine, but now you bring my kids into this, and we talked to couples who, it's not just boys, it's your kids or It is daughters. Like, I'm not seeing, my daughters will not see that. Like, they will see me sitting or they will see you helping or whatever, but like, we aren't repeating this. And that's part of the other part of children that changes this drastically. The intensity changes. I care in a different way. I don't do our laundry. We do our laundry.
Yes, we do.
And sometimes I do. Sometimes it's just there and it's easy and I don't mind. But that is not my job. My kids have seen Stephen do it just as often. And those things matter. And so when it starts to feel like, wait, this is the 3rd time, or Stephen is just sitting there watching me get the laundry out, or whatever that thing is in your house, it does get intense fast, because it does mean something. Like, why are you letting this happen? Why am I letting this happen?
I mean, what you've just described is the whole history behind laundry, in a way. And I think that that's like the history which was located in your experience as a kid, what you saw, and then and let's just say, the social scripts in our culture, like all of this is wrapped up in these little things. And I think that, that is one of the things that can feel so revolutionary, I think, for some couples, is when you just say like, well, wait a second, let's just pause. And what we try to do is like help people work through that self-reflective part, because it is hard to do in the midst of stuff. And you start finding the history of these things. They're like, oh, well, that's why this laundry on this day mattered so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when partners are able to hear their partner tell the story, I think that there's much more empathy. There's much more understanding, rather than if all they're hearing is that energy and that you never do the laundry. That's not the whole story. And that's where a lot of, fights and conflict gets stuck, is just in those kind of blaming, critical places. And then, partner gets defensive, and then you're not getting anywhere.
And reactive and or withdraw and just like forget it. And that's when you also hear that line, everybody's least favorite line of like, it wouldn't matter. I could do the laundry today, but you'd be mad about the dishwasher tomorrow. Like, no. No.
I have that line didn't occur to me until you just said it right now. That's why I'm laughing, because I was like, oh gosh, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, there's an entire chapter in the book on that that feeling of it doesn't matter. And that is a real feeling, because the opposite is also true. There's this feeling of like there isn't a measuring up, but there's a story behind that too. All behavior, right, is communication. We all know that. It's just hard. Frankly, when you're overwhelmed and feel like you're drowning, it's really hard to care about what your partner's behavior is communicating to you.
That's right.
It's like, you know what, swim. We're all drowning here.
Right.
Yeah.
You're like, I just need a lifesaver. Can someone just please throw me a lifesaver at this point?
Yes. And it looks to me like you're on the boat. Why is that harder for you? Like, throw the life support.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. What are some of the trends that you've been seeing with the couples that you speak with? Some of the trends of conflicts?
Yeah, good question.
I think that, obviously we were just, I can't remember when we were talking about this, but one of the things that I think is maybe not a trend, but maybe I would say like thematic, like fundamental to the couples that we talk with. And I'm thinking particularly in like mixed gendered couples, where and this is something that starts in pregnancy, but lasts
until it doesn't,
forever until it's resolved. So I mean, you can there's couples who are 5-10 years into the relationship, and there's still these painful things that have happened in pregnancy that have never been resolved, and so and then it filters through the whole relationship. But I think it's this idea that in pregnancy, the pregnant partner is having such a unique and different embodied experience. Like Erin, like I could not, like no matter what I did, I could not like really feel and know what it was like for her to be pregnant and what was happening for her. It was more intense. It was more, more everything. And I think that one of the things that happens between couples is the Erins are sitting there trying to tell the Stevens, hey, this is what's happening. Hey, like take pictures. Hey, touch my belly, or don't, or what they're trying to bring their partner into their experience. And I quite honestly, like, I mean, I thought it was great, but I was just like, okay, like I didn't step towards Erin in that place and in that depth of engagement. I didn't in some ways also just let her lead that. Like there's just specific things she needed and knew she needed, and she could tell me and I wouldn't necessarily respond. That feeling happening. And then once you have the baby, that feeling continuing. And I think that plays a lot into things like the mental load, the invisible labor, all of that kind of intensity as well, because I think that's just a further continuation of that feeling of I'm having an otherworldly experience and I'm trying to tell you about it and I feel like you're not paying attention. I think that is at the foundation of 93% of all the conflicts.
With older kids? Like how would that present?
And then I think just with older kids, it's the resentment has stacked up. It's just the frustration has stacked up, and there's this real feeling of we are disconnected. You don't support me or help me in parenting. And that can be like at any age. subsequently.
Well, I think
moving forward,
the way I'm thinking that this looks a little bit later too is that this is the one parent who's like, I feel like I'm the CEO of parenting, and I've got my extra kid.
I'm trying to get our teenage kid into college, and I'm the one who's doing all the research and doing all the trips and doing those kinds of
and then you've got the other partner who's like, they micromanage everything I do anyway. So what's the point? Like, I just sit around and just wait to be told what to do. I'm great at executing.
I'm super help. I'm willing to help, but if I try to take any initiative, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I think that does start there. I think that's right.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the biggest trends because it repeats, and the thing is it lasts. It can last so long into the relationship, and that resentment can just kind of calcify and get worse and worse unless, you're able to like go back and I think you can go back at any point in your relationship, no matter how far down the road you are, and you have to talk through that and repair that. I know certainly we had to do that. But it wasn't until, I don't know, a lot of years in.
Like 5 or 6 after kids, you mean?
Yeah. That we had to re-explore those things. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, I'm looking for engagement here. Yeah, like, of course you can't understand my experience, but like, I do need you to step towards us. It's not me and the kids and Steven's coming for the ride. Like, it's us. I think that is a really big one. I think you're right. That is not at all what I was thinking.
Well, and I think another trend too is, and I think this is a really positive one, how many couples just want to have a good relationship? They just want to be like at the core of, any of the couples we talk to or hear from, a lot of the anger and the disappointment is because they want their relationship to be good and to be close, or it felt like it was, and then it got hard. And I think that is, for us, one of the fundamental things, like we truly believe like couples want to be close.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things you really have to locate too, I think, with couples is like, you did have, it's not like this all the time. There are moments where you can connect. There are moments where you do feel close. There is goodness. There have been good times. This is a really tough time. This is a stressful time, but you can learn how to be close and to be good even in the midst of this.
Yeah.
I think
one of the other trends I was thinking about is overwhelm. I know I've said that word a few times already, but I think couples are really overwhelmed. I think, but separately, as a couple, as a family, we all want, we've met a lot of couples at this point, and 100% of them want the best for their kids and for their family. And the best feels pretty unattainable for a lot of people, because what is that? What does that mean to us? What does that mean to you? What does that mean for me? What is that going to cost me? Like, I want time with my kids, but I also want to be able to pay for their groceries. How do we have both? And I think couples and individuals, frankly, are very overwhelmed and are feeling really like an intense burn of this is really hard and maybe impossible, frankly. Like, how do we do this?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's no, that's
well, that feels depressing.
Yeah.
Steven made a positive note, so I tanked it.
Just take us down a notch, would you?
I think it's true.
But she's being honest. It's not like she was like, oh, it's all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. Like
the trend is happiness and joy.
And lies.
And lies. That's right. Yes.
And bold-faced lies.
And I think to your point, like, I think that is still at the root of that.
Yes.
The root of feeling overwhelmed and burnt out is that intense desire and hope for something great for our kids, for our family. But how do we do that? And this is costing me a lot. And I'm trying really hard. I've actually never tried harder at anything. I don't really feel like we're making much progress.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I wake up and do it all over again.
And you've been hearing that from like couple after couple.
Yes. Yeah. Some version of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a nap now, everyone. I feel
Wait,
tired. It's heavy.
It is heavy.
But it's a heavy conversation if you think about it. I mean, we're talking about conflict, right? So at the heart of a conversation about conflict, it's going to be heavy. It's not going to be all rainbows and unicorns.
Yes, Stephen.
I know.
Sorry. Is back to school shopping stressing you out, dreading long lists and running from store to store, hunting for those supplies? Ugh, I get it. Me too. This year, there's a better way. Introducing teacherlists.com, the website that makes back to school shopping a breeze. Teacher Lists takes teachers' back to school supply lists and transform them into easy to use shoppable lists online. That means no more scrambling to find the right notebooks or those mystery markers. Teacher Lists connects with major retailers like Target, Walmart, Amazon, Staples, and more. So you could shop for everything you need at your favorite store with just a click. No more running from store to store. Teacher Lists ensures that you get the exact items that your child's teacher wants, so your child is fully prepared and confident on the first day of school. This back to school season, ditch the stress and embrace the ease. Head over to teacherlists.com to order those supplies today. Happy shopping! But I want to ask you about the 13 conflicts or the types of conflicts, right? 13 is a lot. Like, can you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, without going into every single one, because this will be like a 3-hour podcast, can you just give me some of like the top line, most important ones that couples should be working through?
Yeah. So honestly, the way that in my mind that this book would go, that an individual can certainly read this book on their own. Should, like, if your partner's not interested, great, no big deal. Like, if you change and begin to heal and begin to communicate in a different way, your system will change. It doesn't mean your partner will necessarily change in all the ways you want, but like a changed person is changing a system. So do that anyway. But also, I highly recommend couples to do this together. You do your part, you do ours. We have, I'm going to get it. But there's, at the end of each chapter, there's like questions for reflection. And so not every couple is going to have every single one of these conflicts exactly. Right. But thematically, we're talking about the things every couple is talking about. And it may not be your thing right now. It may not feel top of mind. So go to the chapter that does. That's okay too. Like, but I really do think that if a couple reads through it together, you're going to take something out of every chapter, or you're going to pocket it away for not too long from now when you want it.
Well, and I think some of the big chapters we have a chapter in there called the My Life Has Changed and Yours Hasn't conflict. And that's kind of to that theme of the pregnant partner versus the non-pregnant partner, like that entire experience. We have another one about the mental load. I'm carrying the mental load.
You're too stressed.
Yeah.
I liked that one.
And then I think also the ones about the family, like I hate your family. We have one in there called I Hate Your Family.
Or stop choosing your family over mine.
Let's talk about that. That's a fun topic.
And I think that these are some really big hitters. But yeah, the stop choosing your family over mine or the I hate your family is.
Yeah, there's also one like the big decision. And I think we use in that one like choosing to go back to work after a kid or not. But the idea is, it's about a big decision. Like that could be about moving. That can be about what
taking a promotion somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Like traveling.
So they are thematic. But yes, where you tell us about the family part.
No, that I want to hear more about that because that, I mean, not that I'm saying that may be a conflict in our family, but I'm not saying that.
Yes.
Right. Well, so I think
it's massive in almost everybody's because even if you have.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be negative from the standpoint. We talk to a lot of couples who have what we would consider like relatively like healthy and supportive family relationships. Like it's not something really like toxic or bad, in any way. But there's still always this feeling of being pulled between families and then feeling like.
Well, for us, I think we don't talk about this in the book, but I was very close with my mom. My mom has passed away now, but she was great. She was healthy. She and Stephen would have conflict. She would like work to repair. She wasn't a perfect person, but she did the work to be healthy with us. That's all you can really ask for.
That's incredible.
It's incredible. But there were still moments where like, I'm thinking of like one of our sonograms. I was thinking I could ask my mom to come. And he was like, I was thinking she wouldn't come. Like, what if it could just be us? And that's not bad or wrong. It's not wrong for me to want her to be there. And it's not wrong for Stephen to be like, or hear me out. What if this was just about us for a minute?
Or we would have times like when we lived back where Erin's family is from, like where there was just a lot of family things that would happen. I was like, could we like
choose one?
Yeah, I like.
Could we
your
just
family.
not? Could we not?
Well, I'm like, I like your family a lot. I'm like, but like for on a weekend, if every weekend day is like something with your family, I'm like, could we like do one thing and then we do something else? Like those kinds of things begin to feel like, well, what's wrong? You don't like my family? Like what, like what's wrong with being with family? You don't want to be close to my family? Like there's all these kinds of conversations that come up and are really hard to, they can be they can feel very personal.
Well, they get personal. It does turn into like...
Then you feel sort of pulled between two worlds.
Absolutely. You're asking me to choose.
And then there's kids.
And it's like, I didn't realize I should have to ask you to choose. It seems like this should be obvious.
Or I just want our kids to know their grandparents, or I just want our kids to have time with their cousins, or I just, and then it's like, well, I mean, I do too, but like
totally
7 days a week, I don't know. Like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And you just have to have, again, you have to know the stories behind why those things are important. Like, so for Erin and me, yes, I'm so bad with...
can't do the me or I.
Yeah, I always say,
ever.
I was about to say Erin and I, but I think it's Erin and me.
You're right.
Yeah,
you
Erin
are
corrects
right.
me all the time.
Well, at this point, I don't even have to.
Yeah, just correct myself.
He's doing it himself. See, there you go.
Live on a podcast. Way to go.
But you are correct.
Okay, good. So Erin and me, like I grew up very isolated, didn't really ever see my extended family. Erin grew up like living with her extended family in some ways. Like really. I mean, like you would stay at your aunt's house, after school and that kind of stuff.
To Stephen is living at.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
Whatever you did, I don't know. And so
no question. We were very close.
That alone is we're going to run into endless conflict about family. And it's not even that anyone has like unhealthy, it's not like Erin's family's trying to be like unhealthy and awful or my family is either. It's just different experiences. And so, it's just trying to, we kind of walk couples through like how to navigate this type of conversation.
Mm-hmm. Every couple's having a conversation about in-laws in some way or another all the time. And it usually isn't going well. It's true.
It's true,
because it's hard. It's important. It's back to that, like, we care. Like, don't ask me to not include my family in things. And then I'm not asking you to not include your family in things. I'm asking for me to feel like a priority sometimes. Like, and of course, everyone wants those things. We don't want to have to discard our families, and we want to feel like a priority. Can't those happen at the same time? Yes, they can.
If you talk
but not
about
without some conversations.
Right.
Yeah, but it's true. I'm glad that you are talking about that in the book because I feel. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like the in-law conversation is not something that you hear often enough.
Mm-hmm.
That we often talk about the invisible labor, the mental load, divvying up household domestic tasks. But the conversation about the in-laws feeling pulled one way or the other, I feel like just doesn't come up as frequently.
And it's messy. And I think part of why it doesn't come up is it also feels negative. And it feels like a very stuck place. I think the mental load, I'm trying to think like, so that doesn't feel like a stuck place. Like, no, I think for a lot of couples, that feels like a pretty stuck place.
Sure.
It doesn't have to. And I think there's a lot more language. And I think that I hope we feel like we're seeing some big shifts in that.
Yes.
But
I think in the last few years, there's been big shifts in that.
Yes. And even if because I do think I'm imagining a lot of people listening to this feeling like, for who? Where are those big shifts? But But even the language, I think language is the beginning, right? Like we have to know what to say and what to call it and how to describe it.
Well, you got to break up the patriarchy. And I think that
That's exactly
in some
right.
ways, I mean, in some ways, like what I see the shift being is that the more like men are not like, this language is not like, what are you talking about? Like even just the ability to like that this language means something and that there's an interest in it and that there's an awareness. Like to me, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's not enough, but it's a big deal. But,
it's the beginning, right? And you're right. It isn't enough. It can't be the end. But it is, there are shifting places here. But for the in-law conversation, I think it feels like, what's the point? And especially think back to ours. Stephen from the beginning was like, your mom's great. Like he would never have been like, she's terrible or she's trying to be invasive or she comes too often or none of that. He would have never said that. So to bring it up feels like, am I saying that? Like, are you hearing, like, because I'm not saying that, but I am saying something. Like, what are we trying to say? But and I don't actually remember a time, but I'm positive there was a time when Stephen did try to bring something up. Like, what if we didn't spend $1,500 that we don't have to go to St. Louis for 24 hours for Christmas this year? And I'd be like, no, I'm not doing
non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. That's not a conversation either. So but bringing those things up can feel like, what is the point? And is this going to go anywhere?
Well, and I think too, it's so like your family. It's your family. Like whether you had forever. Whether you had good relationships or bad relationships,
or something in between,
or in between. Like it's just so it's so rooted in your physical, your blood, your thinking, your like everything, and so. To talk about that is to talk about something so intimately personal to yourself. And I think that it can just feel difficult. Like for myself, like I didn't have the greatest family experience. And so in my mind, it's like Erin would start talking about my family and I would find myself defending my family when I didn't really even feel that strongly about my family, but it was just like, it's just my family.
It's one of those things like, you don't get to pick on my sibling. Like I pick on my sibling, but like you don't get to pick on my sibling.
And so it just is so, it's so important and it's so rooted in who we are. And I think that it's so intimate. It's so vulnerable. And so I think that why we don't talk about it like out in the world a lot is because people are like, oh, well, you don't talk about, that intimate of stuff, out loud. And then I think for partners, it's just like, I'm not quite sure how to do that. This feels very, very, exposing.
Well, at the core of these conversations, at the core of all of them really, but certainly at this one, we're talking about fear. We're talking about like the thing we desire most, which is connection. And we feel like our fear is either being like gently pushed or just not gently pushed, like push. And that our hope for what we wanted or our vision for our family is being threatened. And that's a really tough spot to have a very open, mutual conversation.
Yeah. And I think a lot of couples think like, I want to stay connected, so I won't talk about this because it'll create a conflict.
And then you add in that toxicity
that just creates
piece.
Being disconnected. Like you got to talk about stuff. You got to talk about the hard stuff. That's how you get connected.
But the toxic piece too. So we talk, we talk a lot about when there is a toxic grandparent, but we use grandparent because you can't say every possible relation, but
right. And toxic being someone who
is violating,
is not safe.
Yeah.
Constantly violates boundaries, might be struggling, with addiction, substance abuse or addiction, or these kinds of might have been
where safety is a real concern.
Yeah, an abusive person in the past, like that. That's kind of the toxic
criteria. But they usually come with people who aren't. And the rest of the family has accepted that. So like, we'll use my family. So we have and this is not real, but like, right. I'm going to say like, we have a person like a toxic uncle, and Stephen's like, I'm not going to let that happen with our kids. I'm like, yeah, but then, but
But then
the other uncle's
their
safe.
partner and the cousins won't, they won't be able to hang out with them.
You just have to we just have to figure out you just ignore it. You just you just make sure when they're and then you're starting that really tense conversation of but if you're saying we have to cut this person out and all of a sudden that's not what I said. That is what you said. If you're talking about them, you're talking about yes and no's and blacks and whites and it gets really scary.
Yeah.
Interesting thing what you said, Erin, about fear and being vulnerable. I think that probably sums up the majority of your 13 different conflicts, whether it's intimacy with your partner or the in-law conversation and so many of them. I really feel like that's the core.
Agreed. And if we knew what those things were going in, it would help. But I don't think even for a lot of us, because I think to your point, so many of us were not taught how to communicate our fears and our vulnerabilities in a period. And then
and stop. That was
no qualifications necessary. We just weren't taught how to do that. That wasn't modeled for us. We don't know that. And so you're coming into a conversation where you know something is important, but it really at the end of the day, you don't know what. I don't know exactly what I'm hoping for in this conversation. I don't know exactly what my fear is, but I know that something feels big and burny inside and I need to share it, but it's hard to find what that is.
And I think conversely, a lot of us weren't taught how to listen to someone being vulnerable and expressing those really intimate things. And I think that there is a way to express, there is a way to listen. And I think that these are skills. Again, we talk to couples all the time, couples feel so bad. We're in this tough place. We're not communicating. There's got to be something wrong with us. And a lot of times we just simply say well, where did you ever learn how to do this kind of stuff? And oftentimes, we hear stories of that not happening. So it's so where in the world would you have ever had access to these skills that you're wanting? And they're kind of well, we wouldn't. We're well, of course you wouldn't.
Right.
So what we're talking about is you just have to learn them.
Right.
And the desire, your expression of the desire to have something be different, that's all you need. Because the skills can be learned. The skills to express and that the skills to listen and be empathetic can be learned. And so I think that
and for each partner, because Stephen and I express ourselves so differently, but I'm always looking for the cues I'm sending out. And I'm going to be lost every time if I don't understand, this is how Stephen, I got it. Right. I'm here. And then our listening skills are different too. Stephen is a very, sit down and make eye contact kind of listener. And that can make me feel so anxious sometimes. Stop looking at me. Don't okay. I'm having a hard enough time. Look that way for a minute, I need a break. But I do really well if we're on a run or, it's whatever. And I mean, we all know this about our kids too. Ask them very directly, no, but they'll play it out. You have a teenager, we have a teenager, they express themselves very differently. And I think it's just learning those cues for each other. Oh, you're trying to tell me something. That was two words. But okay, all right.
I'll take it.
Almost missed it, but that's a big thing.
You have to learn one another's language.
Absolutely.
That's
so important.
It's fun.
And that's where yes, conflict can be really intense and difficult. And it is. And then there are ways to have these conversations once you kind of know each other's language and you've practiced and you've gotten a little bit more versed in how to have conflict that leads to connection. It can be more playful. It can be funny. It also doesn't have to take so long. Yeah. It can be a 2-minute conversation, and that's conflict.
But you also know your own sort of the baggage you bring. So it can be I just did that thing, didn't I? I did the thing where you tried to share and I rolled my eyes and then I did the thing. And then it's okay, so we don't have to talk about it. It's not we're having a 45-minute conversation about it.
We can bypass that. I can say, my bad.
Yeah,
tell me what you were saying.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I see it.
Yeah.
And then you move on.
Yeah.
And
And I think that experience helps couples realize like we're doing this together. Like we're working through life together. We are a team. We do understand one another. Look at what we're accomplishing. And I think that can be the ultimate overall arching feeling that couples have.
Yeah, we're not perfect, but we're trying. We're together. We're making the effort. Our kids are seeing that, and that matters a bunch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That matters a ton.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask each of you a question that I ask all of my guests this season, and I want each of you to answer it. Okay, we'll start with Stephen because I'm curious to see his answer first. Okay, what do you think is the biggest modern mom problem right now?
Ooh, I think it's the mental load, invisible labor dynamic from the standpoint of really breaking through those. I mean, I said it, you got to break through the patriarchy. I think it's that. And the battle that modern moms have to fight to get a partner to understand, to express, that is really significant. And I think that it's important, and I think that partners really need to listen. And I hate that, the modern moms are the ones who are still having to do a lot of the work. And that's not, that's the problem. That's the power imbalance of it all. That's the problem. Exactly. To get to, that understanding. But I think that's the biggest one, I think.
I almost didn't interrupt. I did a little. Yay! Okay, so for me, it's hard to be like, no, I don't think that's it.
You're like, I disagree completely.
Yeah, no, I can't say that I do. Can. But I guess maybe a different way of saying it, I think, is loneliness. I think that so many of my friends, certainly myself at times, and definitely the couples we are talking to, modern moms are lonely. We are working hard. Mm-hmm. We've got jobs in some capacity. We are raising our children in some capacity. Sometimes we feel like we're also having to raise our partner. We're taking care of all of these things, and we feel pretty unknown and unseen. Even if we're appreciated or get a couple pats on the backs, like it doesn't feel like someone's with us. It can be lonely. And I think loneliness is a real problem. Loneliness has health implications. Loneliness is a big deal.
It's an epidemic now at this point.
Correct. Yes. So yeah, I think I would say that loneliness.
Yeah. Both of your answers are answers that I hear often, but I still love to ask everyone because everyone comes to that question or comes to their answer with their own experience, right?
100%,
based upon the couples that you meet, how you feel personally, all of the things, right? So that's why I always ask everyone. So I'm also going to ask you this next question is, where can everyone find your book and find you online?
Oh, yes.
So you can find the book on Amazon, Target, anywhere where you buy a book. The book is available. You can find us on Instagram at Couples Counseling for Parents. And
that's also the podcast and website.
Yep. The website, the World Wide Web is couplescounselingforparents.com.
Stephen said that, and one of our kids the other day was like, what's the World Wide Web?
Did they? Yeah. I guess you're right. Oh, that's so funny. No, but it's true. Like, they wouldn't know that.
No.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah.
I'm going to say that to my son later and see what kind of response I get.
That's right.
I do call it the interwebs sometimes.
Yes, the interwebs. Yeah. But basically anything that has couplescounselingforparents.com or at couple, that's us. We're pretty brand consistent.
You are. I give you a lot of credit for that. And you are wonderful, Erin and Stephen. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for chatting. I love the book. I have it right here. Ta-da! Yay! And it's amazing. I see that you have two different covers. What's the story behind the covers?
Not fun?
Yeah, so the other cover is in the UK. The book is available in the UK, and they do different covers.
That's so cool.
Isn't that fun?
So yeah. So if you're in the UK, you can get it.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us, Tara. It's always really, really...
It's always fun.
Insightful, but fun. To talk with you, for sure.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Modern Mom Probs. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive in today's problem with me, your host, Tara Clark. Join me next time when I'll be interviewing another great guest and tackling another modern mom problem. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and a rating. As always, you could head over to Modern Mom Probs on Instagram and give me a follow, or check out my book, Modern Mom Probs, A Survival Guide for 21st Century Mothers, available online wherever books are sold. Well, that's it for today. See you next time, folks.
Hey, it's Michelle Beadle. That's right, the Michelle Beadle. You're welcome. You love talking about sports. I love talking about sports. You know the only thing cooler than talking about sports? Sports! And right now, all your favorite sports are on Sirius XM. I'm talking every NFL game, every game from the NBA, NHL, MLB, every NASCAR race, golf major conference college sports, and all the top games in the WNBA. If it gets your heart pumping, it's on Sirius XM. To start your free trial of Sirius XM today, visit SiriusXM.com/believe.